Now that we know UFOs are real, I think it's time we talk about the vast of night. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am pleased today to have the director of The Vast of Night, Andrew Patterson, on the Film Threat Podcast to talk about his film, which has opened in Driveins and is coming to Amazon Prime on May 29th. Andrew Patterson, welcome to the Film Threat Podcast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here.
I first heard about your film, The Vast of Night, at Slam Dance. It was, I believe, Slam Dance 2019, and that's all anyone could talk about. It was, in fact, when we came out of that at the Slam Dance and Sundance that year in Park City, it was the one film that kept coming up as like one of our top 10, like, this is a movie you have to see. I'm so happy that it's coming out on a vast scale, not to make a joke, but it's a lot of people are going to be able to see this because it's on Amazon Prime, which has been doing an amazing job with the at home in theaters and so many great original series like The Boys, which I'm a huge fan of. So you're in good company. Tell me about this journey to getting this film made. And I have so many other questions for you, but what led to you deciding to I want to do a science fiction movie that has deeper layers, that explores an area that, we've seen UFO and alien films before, but this is told in a completely different and original way. And from a production standpoint, I need to talk about a couple different specific shots for your film.
Okay.
So what led to the making of the film?
Well, initially the concept, I felt like it was slightly untapped for what I would consider more serious cinema viewing. I have been asked multiple times, am I a big genre fan? Am I a big sci-fi fan? Am I a big horror fan? And the answer is I just love great films, and my tendency is to err towards human drama and the kinds of things that are usually dialed in a little bit more into reality. And so I think what Vast of Night was exciting to do is maybe try to take that sort of maybe human drama and then sort of crash it into sci-fi and hope that other people were hungry for that mixing of ingredients, so to speak. I mean, it wasn't necessarily early on that we thought, oh, we have this perfect opportunity to play with layers and to have all these different bold filmmaking techniques to try out. That was not how this came about. I think originally we just wanted to make something that we thought we would watch and would age well and be the kind of movie that, you would watch 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road. I mean, it's not a huge jump to say that something like Before Sunrise or Dazed and Confused had a pretty big effect on how this movie starts, and those movies are aging and dating beautifully. And so I hoped we could maybe tap some of that and then siphon it towards a genre that maybe doesn't get to be treated like an experience. You just don't get to see, kind of a high school walk and talk turn into a movie that takes the experiences of Close Encounters seriously. So that was the nugget of how we got started with it.
Well, it's interesting because it takes place in the 1950s, I assume, and it really gets into what I thought was amazing is the technology at the time. One of the characters, she's a kind of learning about radio journalism, and you get to see not only the physical technology, she has her recording device, but also she works as a, God, I'm not even sure the name of that job, where the switch operator?
Switchboard, yeah.
switchboard operator in a small town where she's, look, if you want to make a phone call back in the day, there was a physical person that switched you and connected you to that line. And you really, and I mean this in a good way, you kind of fetishize over a lot of the technology, which I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. It wasn't just, I mean, it's in a way, it's like another character in the film. I wonder if you would talk about that.
No, for sure. I mean, look, the drama of anything that sort of, I guess, gets in the way of your mission or your objective, that can be anything, right? Like in the case of a movie like Lawrence of Arabia, the drama or the thing that gets in the way of their objective is the sun. It's just simply that there's a star, millions of miles away hitting the earth, and the section of it that Lawrence wants to cross is a desert. And then they mine that for an hour of a movie. Just the brutality of the sun hitting the desert. So you go to a movie like The Vast of Night, and you're given this kind of like gift from the movie gods that for people to communicate, they have to go through an old switchboard. And the kind of people that connect it up are usually women, and a lot of them are young. And so we just leaned into what the drama of that would be like, what it would feel like to have something new play through the radio waves of your radio and then come through the switchboard at your job. And then hopefully if you had the moxie and the curiosity to follow it, that you would probably be able to arrive at some conclusions and foil the mystery at hand. And so there were a few of those opportunities in this movie, and one of them was a switchboard, and then obviously later on tapes and radio, and sort of where we hit another point in the script later. But we just chose to treat the switchboards like they were an obstruction, or at least an aid in the drama, but an obstruction typically to the characters' goals, and found the drama there.
Well, it works tremendously. What you're talking about kind of reminds me of a quote from Quentin Tarantino when asked his favorite period of time to make a film. He said, any time before cell phones, because I think part of the problem today, or at least the problem challenging filmmakers and screenwriters, is what do you do in an age when most problems can be solved with a cell phone, right? So I really appreciate that you chose to make tell the story via a period piece. It could very well have been a podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
But making it a period piece makes it especially unique. And speaking of unique ways of telling the story, your camera is alive in this thing. I swear. It's I'm sure you've been asked this many times because it's such a remarkable feature of the film. But the way that the camera moves, and there are some long shots in this that I think would put Scorsese to shame. One in particular going across a long expanse through a field and past houses and other places, and then into a gymnasium where other things are happening. I need to know, especially for the filmmakers that tune in our podcast, I want to know like how you accomplished those shots, what went into it, how many takes. Feel free to go into as much exhaustive detail as you're willing, because it's just it's incredible. And I've watched that one shot that I mentioned previously about 20 times.
Wow.
Because there's a clip of it on YouTube. So that particular clip where the camera just glides and then goes into a gymnasium, and everything seems perfectly choreographed. No one looks at the camera. It's a perfect shot, right? Which, one could only hope to have one perfect shot in a movie. I mean, you have several. This specific shot, I need to know what went into creating that shot. And it takes place at night too. This is all happening. So
Yeah.
I really need to hear how you did that.
A lot of light. I mean, there was, obviously I've said this several places, but we had the natural, I guess, rhythmic metronome of the sun telling us when we could start shooting the movie and when we could, end, because it was, we got to shoot when the sun set, and then we got to shoot when we had to stop when it was rising. And just because you can't see the sun doesn't mean it's not bleeding over the horizon for an extra hour coming and going. So we were very much locked into that. So when you get to everything, every shot in this movie had to be lit. There was no available light. There was no sunlight, no spill, nothing, which is nuts now when I think about it. But we always knew that. I mean, the motivation behind not having a lot of cutty, highly edited, multi-camera shooting in this movie, the motivation is probably is an overreaction to the fact that I want to make movies that don't date, that don't age. And one of the first things that, when you get into making movies, you'll realize one of the first things that dates movies and ages them badly is cutting styles, editing styles. And you go back to movies that were shot in the 40s and you have a simple scene and they'll figure out a way to block it and pan and tilt and keep the camera going. And it's a 3 or 4 minute shot and you won't have thought anything of it just because it's so brilliantly done. And we were trying to throw back a little bit more to that, to where we didn't have to do insert shots for every time Faye plugged a switch, a plug into a switchboard, and didn't have to do close-ups of every single tape that Everett threw on a player, which is probably more a crutch when people do that than they realize. We just tried to block them in ways. There's at least 3 shots that are over 4 minutes. One of them is that are just dealing with characters. There's one that's 9 minutes and some change, and then 2 others that are about 4 and some change. And those are very meticulously blocked and staged so that there's drama going on while the cuts aren't present, while the edits aren't maybe what you expect. And in the last one, which is about a 4 minute shot on a monologue with a character that shows up in the 3rd act, she's telling a story, and so you're transfixed hopefully on her story and not necessarily requesting the editor, the director to change angles on her and to jump around in the scene. And so there's a bunch of these in the movie that are 2 minutes, 4 minutes, but usually the staging inside of them, there's a lot going on. And I think that's sort of the trick to making those work. And then I'm breaking out the one that everyone likes to know about, and we've been asked about it, for a year now, and it is a, in the script, I think it's on page 50. It says, Faye picks up a cigarette, grabs a lighter, stands up from her switchboard, walks over to the door to let some air in, and then the camera drifts out the door, goes down the street, moves through some backyards. It even breaks down how the score would theoretically sound, a very horn-centric, like an exciting sort of thing. This is probably a page, maybe, and half a page description of this camera sort of flying through the backs of people's houses, not breaking the laws of physics. Like we're not going through keyholes and so on, but we're just roving. And then we land at a spot that we saw earlier, which is a high school gym, which is where everybody's congregating. And it's meant to show that the switchboard operator is alone, the streets are empty, and everyone's at this game. And then we decide to keep pushing through the game, and we push through the game, and we push through the doors into the game, and we go over some people's heads, and then we go through the middle of the gym, right through the game, and then we go up some stairs and on the other side of the gym, and then we
push out the back of a window, and then we drop down 25 feet or so, and then we start flying down the road again, and then wrap around a building, and then you see the radio station call letters, WOTW, and you see a tower on the top of a building, and then you wrap around the building, and then there's the character that you saw earlier, it's the DJ, which is Everett. And then we push in, and then right at that moment, he gets a call and he grabs the phone, and the shot ends. And so all of that, everything I just described is it is shot. It is footage that we shot, and there are, let's see here, we had to cheat to get the geography to work. And so there are 3 very careful blends of 3 different shots that are so impossible to detect that, and we've never lied about this. We did shoot this footage. We did go down these paths. We did push through the backyards. We did, and where the cuts are, I'm gonna leave that to our brilliant VFX guys. They're going to break it down here in a week or two, and they're going to let that be. I want them to kind of get the stage for that, because they're the ones that crushed it, and we were never dishonest about how we did it, because we did shoot it. We did shoot every bit of it, but to make sure, one of the blends, I'll give this one away because it's a practical thing. It's a really it's an important one as a filmmaker and as a producer and as somebody on the ground of indie productions. You got to understand, we were able to get 400 extras in our gym shot, and that was on a Saturday night, and we were not able on that exact same night to also have our old retro antique cars in the parking lot. Just for a million logistic reasons, we couldn't get 20 cars in the parking lot. So one of the blends actually happens right at the doorway pushing into the gym. So we have a green screen sitting there with these characters sort of in the shot. But when you see, at some point, we'll put out a VFX breakdown, I'm sure, we end up pushing into the same space that is... the blend wouldn't have been necessary on a bigger budget movie. Okay. That one would have been just get the cars there on the same night that you have 500 people, 400 people in a building. But we couldn't do that. We actually had to shoot this thing in 4 shots that probably should have taken 3. And I can speak to the fact that, we envisioned it for the movie to be something that was compelling for the story, for the narrative. And then when we wrote it, we wanted to do it as practical as anything. We wanted to run the camera down the road on a gimbal or a go-kart or a golf cart or whatever would let us go 30 or 40 miles an hour. We didn't use a drone. There's no drone usage in this movie. And we wanted it to, I originally wanted it to be entirely 100% organic, but the challenges of finding the exact spots where we liked the story to play out, the switchboard where it was located, the gym where it was located, and then the radio tower where we built it and put it up, we're not close enough together to do that. And so we ended up blending the shots, but we still shot them. And so I am excited to let everybody see all the other work that made that click, which I think will illuminate people on what you can do on a lower budget movie that, if you're resourceful and clever and maybe don't take no for an answer and pick up the phone and call the right people, you might be able to do something that nobody kind of thought was imaginable at this level.
Well, it is such a standout of the film. I mean, it contributes to a couple of things. One, the tone of the film, which is fantastic. To me, that is always what separates the directors I really like to the ones that I think are not as worth paying attention to is tone. And then not only that, it also establishes the geography, right? And which I think is really important to the story. I do also want to ask you about your actors, because in a film that makes use of so many long shots, it that puts a lot of strain on your actors for sure. And we're not just talking about performances, remembering dialogue and whatnot, but it's also very physical performance in many respects. Having, especially with Faye and the switchboard and using the technology at the time, it seems to me that the actors must have spent some time with that technology to get used to it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about working with your actors and what that entailed?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm very proud of our actors. I think the thing that we did right is we found people that were 100% on board for what we threw at them. And for Sierra, who played Faye, that was, many nights where she ran with a live infant in her arms, take after take after take, which, you might get somebody that would complain about that if they had been on bigger shoots with more, we didn't have trailers for them. So between takes, they just would sit on a curb in their wardrobe, just sort of like, find a spot to be alone. And Sierra was a little bit of a, a celebrity in general, but especially with high schoolers and stuff. So on a night like where you work with 400 or 500 extras, she didn't have the kind of privacy that she would have been used to. And so her love for this role was way beyond, having to do a 10-minute take at a switchboard. It was sort of like a lot of times not even having a place to let her guard down, just because we were so low-fi, so low budget. And the performances came out of a pretty, I would say, a heavier rehearsal project than maybe, or process than they were maybe used to. Not Jake. Jake came from theater, who plays Everett, and so he's not. This is the kind of guy who had the entire 106, 110 pages of the script memorized, so we could pivot onto him any night that we had an extra hour to move on to another scene if we so could. He was great at that. Sierra had come from tons of years of Disney Channel and Curb Your Enthusiasm and all these very big productions. And so I brought them out a week and a half or 2 weeks before shooting, which is not something you really get to do on indie films. Because you're usually negotiating the rate by the week. And so they made the decision to come out on their own 10 days, 12 days before production. And I grilled them every day. I mean, I didn't let them relax. I mean, it was rehearsing for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon. And we got them to a place where by the time we got to shooting it, they were showing up and staying inside of the brackets or the zone, the goalposts we'd set for their performance. And then we would get to, dial it in, which is something that's so nice about having great actors, is you might have your take on number 2 or 3, but, you still got 8 hours of the day left, and you can start to mine and dig and drill for more interesting opportunities for them. And it was their preparation that allowed for that.
What was the journey like to get from this movie premieres at Slamdance to acclaim, so many people talking about it, to then getting to a place where, as an indie filmmaker now, your film is coming out in wide release through Amazon Prime? What's that journey like? And I know that I remember reading, because I wanted to read everything about this film, and you kept it kind of quiet, which is cool. You want to save, all the press for when the movie's coming out, right? Obviously,
Right.
Smart. But I remember reading that you got signed by William Morris, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this film really got a lot of acclaim. What's that journey like from people are seeing it now to you kind of got to go quiet to now you can talk to people about it finally?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in the background of all of that, I stay creatively engaged. So I am very much, even if Vast of Night isn't in front of the public eye, there's a lot that goes into getting a movie all the way to a release at a place like Amazon, especially a lower budget film. We kind of, I landed kind of in the lap of 3 wonderful, reps at William Morris who were very passionate about my movie. They weren't just passionate about the next thing I was going to do, which was that's an important differentiation. I got a lot of calls and met with studios and so on. everyone's been lovely. I haven't had a bad Hollywood experience. And I've made a lot of connections and have a lot of friends that I feel like are cheering on my trajectory and the movie and Vast of Night. I get emails every day from people from, all over the industry that are just like, hey, I got to watch this movie at a drive-in over here, or I sent the link to somebody that loved it, and here's their responses. And so where we go from, like, where I got from, or when I left Slamdance, I met with my soon-to-be agents a few days after that. They wouldn't take no for an answer. They wouldn't leave me alone. They flew out to meet me, and they were very much like, hey, we love the Vast of Night, and we want to help you on your next stuff. And my big caveat was, can you get the Vast of Night distributed? Do you think you can get it sold? And they were convinced they could. And so the sales agency there is Endeavor Content, and they started shopping the movie around, and they got it into all the kinds of places that you would be as an indie filmmaker, just thrilled to see a note come in from a Bad Robot or Blumhouse and so on, that they'd seen the movie, and it was very humbling and very exciting. And we had some wonderful offers, and then eventually Amazon was the one that seemed like the best fit, because we knew we wanted a movie that was going to live in a place for a long time, that people could discover it, because we do feel like we made a movie that will age well and will be popular years down the road. And so we got with Amazon. I knew that we had some champions of this movie. Ted Hope at Amazon loves it. Scott Fondas at Amazon loves it. And then all of the marketing people at Amazon just absolutely love the movie. And so for the last year, we've all been strategizing and trying to come up with the way to make sure that it connects to the viewers that will like it, with as little spill into advertising it towards people that are just going to be disappointed that it doesn't go the way they thought it would. And that's some alchemy right there. That's some voodoo that I don't understand about how to market towards the most likely demographics that are going to love your movie and be champions for it, and to not accidentally send it towards individuals that are going to start checking their phone 5 minutes into the movie out of disengagement. And so that's where I feel like Amazon's been an awesome partner. And so we landed in a situation with them where we were going to go out theatrical on May 15th, just like we ended up doing. It was just going to be normal theatrical. It's going to be 50 markets at once, not thousands of screens, but hundreds. And then the pandemic hit. And so they pivoted and came up with the idea of doing it as drive-ins. And it's been a kind of a match made in heaven of people getting to see this movie, in gravel parking lots, and watch a movie that's about close encounters on a screen that sort of blends into the sky behind it. So, you couldn't ask for more.
You couldn't have planned it better if that was the original plan. And I've been a big fan of drive-ins. The Mission Tiki, where it's playing, I've been to many times. That's a great drive-in, along with the Pacific Violent. It's amazing. I mean, it's really the best. To me, that's the secret to social distance film going, is drive-ins. And there used to be, at their height in the 1960s, drive-ins there were 6,000 drive-in movie theater screens. Now in the United States, my understanding is it's less than 500 screens.
Yeah,
but I think
a little over 300, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could see drive-ins making a comeback, but what's even more amazing is drive-ins really became popular in the 1950s, so it could not be a better match for the film. It's like you planned it. So, and I know Ted and Scott over at Amazon. They're amazing. Ted in particular, I've had some amazing conversations with him about indie film, and he really knows his marketing stuff. And I have to give a shout out just to Amazon Prime in general. A lot of people think, the big originals that are on, Amazon Prime, Mrs. Maisel and The Boys and things like that. But there are a lot of indie movies on Amazon Prime,
Mhm.
a lot, and I have a lot of friends that have their films on Amazon. So
Yeah.
it's you don't have to dig too deep to find amazing stuff. I do want to ask you. I know you got to go, but I got to ask you. It's almost like another fortuitous thing. Your film is about UFOs. It's actually about much more. I actually don't want to ruin it for people. There are much deeper layers, which I think all great sci-fi has deeper layers to it, and your film certainly has that. But it's now just the Pentagon released video of real UFOs, and your movie's about UFOs. What did you think when that footage came out a couple weeks ago?
I mean, I have been. A lot of people have asked me that. I am not the leading expert of any kind just because I have a movie that deals with them. Obviously I think I'm like everyone, and I think the thing that's interesting about it is I like unknown things to exist. Like, I'm actually a big fan of like things sitting in a place where they can't be resolved. That's a very exciting and fun thing. And so whether or not what this is and what this new footage is, and whether or not it actually ever gets an answer, I think is actually what makes it interesting. As long as it's not a threat to people, I'm kind of like, I'm game for things to keep popping up in our world and in our universe that can't get a nice, easy answer.
Well, again, it's like you planned it. So, Andrew Patterson, thank you so much for being on the Film Trap podcast. Congratulations again on the film.
You.
I'm happy to have seen it in a theater, which I do recommend, although it is on Amazon Prime on May 29th. Can't wait to see what you do next, man. Please come back on the podcast. And a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
All right. Take care, Andrew. Thanks again.